So good, so good, so good.
Everything you want for summer is at Nordstrom Rack stores now, and up to 60% off. Stock up and save on the brands you love like Vince, Sam Edelman, Frame, and Free People. Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, the 19th of May, and this is the Brussels Playbook podcast. The vibe in Brussels today is thawing because after years of Viktor Orbán blocking Ukraine's EU path, Hungary and Ukraine are going to talk to each other today, and Brussels is wondering whether Budapest might finally be softening its position. Also on the podcast today, the EU is getting all cozy with Greenland, despite, or rather probably because of, Trump's America keep on circling the Arctic island. And thirdly, what do pop star Bono, former German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and Giannis Antetokounmpo, otherwise known as the Greek Freak apparently, have in common? We'll keep listening to find out, and we'll tell you in a few minutes. I'm Ian Wishart, and with me today is Nick Vineker, Politico's chief foreign correspondent. Hello, Nick.
I think you deserve a round of applause for that pronunciation.
You said you just said you knew how to pronounce his name because
Lil Wayne famously raps Antetokounmpo with something else for all our hip-hop fans out there.
Which there are a lot. There's a big crossover between hip-hop and the Brussels Playbook podcast, we're told.
Bigger than we think, I'm sure.
Shall we start with Hungary and Ukraine then? Because there's going to be a meeting today between experts from both countries. This would have been unthinkable a month or two ago, but the meeting's about the rights of Hungarian minorities in Ukraine. That all sounds quite technical, but in Brussels, people are watching this very closely, aren't they?
Yeah. So the issue of the minorities in Hungary was Viktor Orbán's sort of big claim against Ukraine for months and months and months. And then in the final months of his campaign, he switched over to a sort of maximalist line saying he would just never let Ukraine into the EU. But it is there on the table and it sort of needs to be addressed. So the fact that we're now having this expert level talks in Ukraine about this issue is seen as a very positive sign. Another thing is Hungary's foreign minister, Anita Orbán, no relation to the ex-PM, and Ukraine's foreign minister had their first sort of publicly acknowledged contacts over the weekend. So these are all good signs. And
I think people would be forgiven for thinking that Prime Minister Orbán, the former Prime Minister, his objection to Ukraine joining the EU was a purely ideological one. But actually, as you were just explaining there, these rights of the Hungarian minority in Ukraine is very real for the people actually living in the country.
Absolutely. And it's an issue that cannot just be brushed away. I think that for Peter Magyar, the new prime minister, it was easy to sort of settle the question of rule of law and come to Brussels and ask to unfreeze that money. But the status of Ukraine and their membership talks,
this is something they've got to sort out, is it? The status of the minority in Ukraine?
They have to come to an agreement on the status of these minorities. And Ukraine has made proposals for months. They were rejected by or ignored by Hungary. And now it looks like they may be accepting them.
And the timing's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Hungary, partly because of this issue, has been preventing Ukraine from opening formal negotiation clusters. So even while Kyiv has been de facto negotiating with the EU to join, the formal process has never really opened because it requires unanimous support from all EU capitals. They've effectively been vetoing the progress. And now people are saying it's time to pay attention because this might finally sort of come unstuck.
You spoke to some Ukrainian officials yesterday, I know. What was the tone from them?
I think we're hearing a lot of optimism from Kyiv. They're talking about not just these contacts, but they're also looking to a potential meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Peter Magyar.
Oh, that would be huge.
Yep. They say, that's in discussions and could sort of firm up in coming months. And of course, that would be a major sea change.
So I suppose you can see today's meeting being sort of real preparation for eventually that type of high-level meeting, I suppose.
Absolutely. Another thing we heard is that, in those first conversations that Magyar had with Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa, president of the Commission and Council, the question of EU enlargement also came up. So they've been sounding him out on where he stands on this, and the signals look pretty positive. I do get some people from the Council saying, caution, this may not happen as fast as Kyiv wants. Kyiv's talking about, as soon as next week, opening this first cluster. They say, just hold your horses. It could last a little longer than that.
Should we just zoom out quite a lot, actually, Nick, and just fill people in where we are on Ukraine's potential membership of the EU, because not everybody reads every word that we write. Because they would have seen some reference to, could Ukraine be joining the EU in 2027? No, some countries oppose that. It could be a lot later than that. There's maybe partial membership. Where do we stand at the moment?
Yeah, so the timeline is really important because it's linked to the peace process. And if Zelensky is going to go to the Ukrainians and say, well, here's the peace deal, he really wants that promise of EU membership as a big selling point for them. So the Ukrainians are really set on this idea of 2027. Now, the question is, what in 2027? We spoke to the foreign minister last week, and he said, we want a membership agreement, just the deal that all countries agree that we should be
on track to join.
To join. Now, actual membership could still be years out because it has to be ratified by all the parliaments. And what we've seen is some of the member states, big member states like Germany, push back on this timeline and say, well, you're not going to get that big agreement. You could get something like associate membership in 2027.
So there's obviously lots of facets to this, but it's interesting that today's meeting is maybe a very small part on that path to progress, but it's obviously very significant. Nick, let's go to another country that's not quite in the EU, Greenland. It's a pretty big week there too, because they've got a European Commissioner there today. The EU Partnerships Commissioner Jozef Síkela is heading. He's in Nuuk for a conference called Future Greenland. Can you put that into some context for us?
Right. So presumably the trip is to check in on EU investments in Greenland, to pop into the EU office newly opened in Nuuk, where 5 people are fully employed there, and to work on the Arctic strategy. But of course, there's a massive geopolitical backdrop, which is that Donald Trump has said he wants to annex Greenland and has not given up on those plans.
I imagine the 5 people in the EU Greenland office sitting there with their bubble woolly hats on and with the EU flag on knitted in them. Obviously, we know what happened a few months ago when Trump was making all these overtures to Greenland. And for people listening at home who don't quite know, Greenland isn't in the EU. It's part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but withdrew from what is now the EU in 1985. So there's a lot of geopolitics going on here as well. And I know you were quite interested in the fact that there's obviously a EU delegation there today, but there's also a US delegation as well.
Right.
Will the two meet?
Yeah, so the choreography is quite interesting because you have Jeff Landry, who Trump has appointed his special envoy to Greenland, is also going to be there. He's made his first official trip to Greenland on Sunday. We're reading reports about a delegation of 10 people traveling around in a 5-car convoy in Nuuk. And these 2 gentlemen are actually going to cross paths at the Future Greenland conference. But from the sources we spoke to, they don't actually plan to speak to one another directly.
Right. Interesting. Because people might think that everything had been sorted out and it has all gone quiet, but that's apparently not necessarily the case.
No, not at all. And Danish officials say it's not a dead issue. And there's a report in the New York Times which talks about ongoing closed-door talks between the U.S., Denmark, and Greenland about the island's future. There's some plans to make U.S. claims to certain bases permanent, give the U.S. veto rights over certain investments in Greenland, point attention their potential with the EU.
So what the EU is therefore doing is trying to pull Greenland closer to the EU. That's kind of the strategy from the Brussels end.
Right. And the EU is investing heavily into Greenland. There was $225 million on the table under the current budget cycle. The Commission has proposed to more than double that for the next long-term budget cycle. Ursula von der Leyen is expected to make a trip up there. And of course, a big part of this is about the critical raw materials that are under the ground in Greenland and this kind of race to have mining rights to develop these things. As you know, China and the United States compete over these materials. The EU is obviously trying to move forward and lay a claim to what's under the ground in Greenland.
So, Nick, shall we talk about the first European Order of Merit Awards? Are you excited?
I expect my call any minute now.
It's the first batch of these. It's been created for the 75th anniversary of the Schuman Declaration, which we talked about a few weeks ago. So no need to remind people what the Schuman Declaration was. I'm sure you could do that very easily, Nick. But this is all happening in the European Parliament today in Strasbourg. And there are 3 categories of the first European Order of Merit Awards, Nick.
Yeah, and this is disappointing to me because I just don't make the first rank. Distinguished members, presidents, prime ministers, heads of state.
No, you're not in that.
Nope. Honorable members, diplomats, humanitarian figures, intellectuals, scientists.
There's nothing intellectual about you. Carry on.
I don't think we make the cut there either. Members of the order. This seems like everyone else.
Squeeze into this.
People from culture, sports, music, celebrities.
Good. Well, the celebrities apparently in line for an award today include Bono from U2, if people remember that from the 80s.
Oh, he's still around. He's in everyone's iTunes.
And also the former German Chancellor Angela Merkel is going to be in Strasbourg today. The former Polish President Wałęsa, who everybody will remember from the fight against communism also in the 80s. There's a very 1980s vibe here. And Javier Solana, the former European Commissioner and also the former NATO Secretary General. They're going to receive a badge, a ribbon and a certificate from Roberta Metsola, the European Parliament President, Nick.
That's right. And there's another fascinating name on the list, at least according to our producer who insisted we mention this.
This is the Greek freak.
Giannis Antetokounmpo, huge NBA superstar, mentioned by Lil Wayne himself, known as the Greek Freak. He was born in Athens to Nigerian immigrant parents, spent years effectively undocumented before getting Greek citizenship in a big ceremony. So today he's one of Greece's biggest stars and a kind of symbol of a more multicultural version of European identity.
And if anybody wants to know, these laureates were selected by a committee, which is always the best way to choose things, I think. Roberta Metsola was on the committee, Michel Barnier, the former commissioner, Jose Manuel Barroso, the commission president, Josep Borrell, Enrico Letta. I mean, what's the criteria? Just anybody who's been pro-European? I don't think Viktor Orbán's going to get one soon, is he?
Probably not this one. I don't know.
Perhaps we could ask you at home who you would choose if you were on that jury. Who would you choose to get a European Order of Merit? Who would you nominate? Who do you think deserves one? If you WhatsApp us, then we might read it out in the podcast tomorrow. Yesterday, Zoya asked for some of your favourite European museums, and we had a couple of people, well, quite a few people write in, actually. What are you doing?
This is a gesture of plenty, our cup overflowing.
Yeah, there's plenty here. Joe from Australia likes the Polin Museum, which is the museum of the history of Polish Jews, located on the site of the former Warsaw Ghetto. Danny from the UK messaged us to say that he liked the Kunsthistorische Museum in Vienna, which houses 5 millennia worth of artwork and valuable objects.
It's a lot of millennia.
These are quite heavy, these museums, aren't they?
Exactly. Where's the comic book museum?
Carl from Malta told us he likes the Warsaw Uprising Museum.
It left a great impression on him in how resilient a people can be. Thoughtful.
And our colleague Emma said she likes the Phoenix Museum in Rotterdam. It's an art museum on the history of migration. She said it was excellent. So that's one little bit more uplifting.
I feel smarter already.
That's what you get when you listen to the Playbook podcast, Nick.
I don't know if that qualifies us for Order of Merit, but...
All right, thanks for listening, everyone. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Have a good day.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.